I walked across the stage at Stanford's Memorial Auditorium to receive my PhD in aerospace engineering, the culmination of 7 years of research that had pushed the boundaries of interplanetary propulsion systems, and the 2 seats I'd reserved in the family section were conspicuously empty. My parents had chosen to attend my brother Marcus's promotion party instead. He'd been elevated to junior manager at his regional insurance company, a milestone they deemed more worthy of celebration than their daughter's doctoral achievement from one of the world's most prestigious universities. I shook the dean's hand, accepted my diploma, and walked off stage without tears because I'd spent 28 years learning that crying never changed their priorities. But why did my mother call 14 times in a single hour 3 days later, and why did her voicemail messages shift from confused to frantic to something approaching desperate? The CNN interview had just aired. The cheer-in at the bottom of the screen read, "Youngest woman to lead NASA's Mars division." My photograph was everywhere. The same face that had walked across the Stanford stage to empty family seats was now being discussed by anchors, shared across social media, and celebrated as a historic appointment. My mother's 15th voicemail was barely coherent. "Why didn't you tell us? How could you not tell us? Call me back immediately, Vivian. We need to talk about this." I listened to all 15 messages. Then I deleted them without responding. The favoritism had started before I could recognize it for what it was. Marcus, 3 years older, had always been the center of our family's universe. His little league games were mandatory attendance. His school plays were filmed from 3 angles. His mediocre grades were celebrated as evidence of his well-rounded character, while my straight A's were dismissed as expected from a girl who has nothing better to do. I'd learned early that achievement wasn't rewarded equally in our household. When Marcus got a B+, he received praise for his hard work. When I got an A+, I received reminders not to become too focused on academics at the expense of social development. "You need to be more likable," my mother would say. "Nobody wants to date a girl who's smarter than them." "Don't intimidate people with all that studying," my father would add. "Marcus knows how to balance life. You should learn from him." Marcus balanced life by coasting on charm and minimal effort. I balanced life by working 3 times as hard for half the recognition. The divergence became starker as we grew older. I'd been accepted to Stanford for undergraduate studies, a full scholarship based on academic merit and research potential. My parents had been confused rather than proud. "California is so far away. Are you sure you wouldn't rather stay closer to home? Marcus is at State, and he's doing wonderfully." "This is Stanford, Mom. One of the best universities in the world. But you'll be all alone out there. Who will take care of you?" The assumption that I needed taking care of, that I couldn't thrive independently, had been insulting enough. The implication that Stanford wasn't worth the distance from Marcus had been worse. I'd gone anyway. I'd thrived anyway. And I'd stopped expecting them to notice. Graduate school had deepened the divide. My research on ion propulsion systems had attracted attention from NASA during my 3rd year. I'd been invited to consult on active missions, to present at international conferences, to collaborate with scientists whose work I'd studied since childhood. None of this registered with my parents as meaningful. "When are you going to finish school and get a real job?" my father would ask during our increasingly infrequent calls. "This is a real job. I'm being paid to conduct research that could affect how humans travel through space. But it's not stable. Marcus has benefits, a 401k, a clear promotion path. You're still a student at 30. I'm a doctoral candidate at Stanford conducting NASA-funded research. Still a student." The graduation conflict had been the final confirmation of everything I'd suspected. I'd sent the invitations 6 months in advance. I'd called to confirm they'd received them. I'd booked their hotel, arranged their flights, planned a family dinner to celebrate. 2 weeks before graduation, my mother had called with the news. "Marcus just found out he's being promoted to junior manager. They're having a celebration the same day as your ceremony. My graduation is a fixed date. His party could be moved. But all his colleagues are already planning to attend. It would be awkward to reschedule. And my graduation? 7 years of work, a doctoral degree from Stanford, that's not worth prioritizing. You'll have other ceremonies. This is Marcus's big moment." I'd had no other ceremonies. A PhD graduation happens once. But Marcus's big moment as a junior manager at an insurance company had taken precedence over everything I'd accomplished. I'd stopped arguing. I'd stopped expecting. I'd walked across that stage alone, and I'd told myself it didn't matter. The NASA appointment had been in the works for months. My dissertation research had solved a critical problem in ion propulsion efficiency that had implications for long-duration space missions. The Mars division had been following my work, and as I'd approached graduation, they'd approached me with an offer that had seemed almost impossible. Director of Propulsion Systems Development. The youngest woman ever to lead a division within NASA's Mars exploration program. A position of genuine consequence in humanity's expansion into space. I'd accepted without telling my parents. Not out of spite, at least, not entirely. But after years of having my achievements dismissed, minimized, or unfavorably compared to Marcus's mediocre milestones, I'd learned to celebrate privately. I'd learned that sharing good news with people who wouldn't value it only diminished the joy. The CNN interview had been scheduled for 3 days after graduation. The announcement had been public, prominent, impossible to miss. I'd known they'd find out. I just hadn't wanted to give them the chance to diminish it first. The interview had been everything my graduation hadn't been. The anchor had introduced me as a rising star in aerospace engineering whose research could reshape human space exploration. The segment had covered my academic trajectory, my research breakthroughs, my historic appointment. They'd shown clips from my dissertation defense. They'd quoted colleagues describing my work as revolutionary and paradigm-shifting. They'd asked about my vision for Mars exploration, my thoughts on interplanetary colonization, my experience as a woman in a male-dominated field. For 15 minutes, I'd been seen, celebrated, recognized for exactly what I'd accomplished. Then my mother had started calling. The voicemails traced an arc from confusion to desperation. Message 1, Vivian, I just saw you on the news. Why didn't you tell us about this NASA thing? Call me back. Message 5, your father is very upset that we had to learn about this from television. This is a big deal, we should have been told. Message 10, people are calling us asking about you. We don't know what to say because our own daughter didn't tell us anything. How could you do this to us? Message 15, call me back immediately. We need to talk about this. We're your parents. We deserve to know. Deserved. As if attendance at my achievements was their right rather than a privilege they'd repeatedly declined. I waited a week before responding. Not to the phone calls, I let those go to voicemail until they stopped coming. But I composed an email, choosing written communication deliberately. I wanted to say what needed to be said without interruption, without manipulation, without the emotional chaos that phone calls with my mother always produced. Mom and Dad, I saw your voicemails. I understand you were upset about learning of my NASA appointment from the news rather than from me directly. I'd like to explain why I made that choice. 2 weeks ago, I walked across the stage at Stanford to receive my PhD, the culmination of 7 years of work, research that attracted NASA's attention and led directly to this appointment. The 2 seats I'd reserved for you were empty. You chose to attend Marcus's promotion party instead. You've made similar choices my entire life. Marcus's little league over my science fairs. His average achievements celebrated while my exceptional ones were dismissed. His comfort prioritized over my milestones. I stopped telling you about my achievements because you taught me they didn't matter to you. The NASA appointment was the biggest news of my life, and I protected it from your indifference by keeping it private. I don't say this to hurt you. I say it because you asked why I didn't tell you, and you deserve an honest answer. Vivian. My mother's response came within 2 hours. A phone call, ignored. A text message, this is ridiculous. Call me now. Then an email, longer than mine, dense with justifications. We couldn't be at your graduation because Marcus needed us. He's struggled with confidence his whole life, and the promotion was important to him. You've always been independent, you didn't need us there the way he needed us at his party. And to suggest we don't care about your achievements is unfair. We've always been proud of you. We just don't understand the science things you do, so it's hard to know what's important and what's not. How are we supposed to know a PhD graduation was bigger than a promotion to manager? The question answered itself, but she couldn't see it. The family dynamics shifted in unexpected ways after the news coverage. Extended relatives who'd barely remembered my name suddenly wanted to connect on LinkedIn. Family friends who'd spent years asking, and what does Vivian do again, now mentioned my NASA position in conversations as if they'd always followed my career. Vivian. My parents began telling people they'd always known I was destined for great things. The revisionist history was staggering. Vivian was always so focused, even as a child. We encouraged her interest in science every chance we got. We're so proud of everything she's accomplished. We always supported her dreams. The narrative they constructed bore no resemblance to my actual childhood. But contradicting them publicly would have made me look petty, so I let them rewrite history to an audience that didn't know better. Marcus's response was unexpectedly honest. He called a month after the CNN interview, the first direct communication we'd had in over a year. I saw the news. Congratulations. That's genuinely impressive. Thank you. Mom and Dad are spinning out. They keep talking about how they should have been there, how they didn't know this NASA thing was happening. They didn't know because I didn't tell them. And they weren't at graduation because they were at your party. Silence on the line. I didn't ask them to skip your graduation. I didn't even know that's what happened until last week. But you also didn't tell them to go. You accepted their presence without questioning why they were available. That's fair. He paused. I've had a lot of time to think since everything blew up. About how things always seemed easier for me with them. How they'd show up for stuff that I now realize wasn't that impressive, while you were doing things that actually mattered. Are you apologizing? I'm acknowledging. I didn't create the favoritism, but I benefited from it. I could have spoken up and didn't. That's surprisingly self-aware. Getting passed over for a promotion I thought I deserved gave me some perspective. Turns out that junior manager title I got? It came with zero actual advancement opportunity. I've been stuck at the same level for 2 years while people I trained got promoted above me. I'm sorry to hear that. Don't be. It's reality. And it made me realize that maybe all those celebrations Mom and Dad organized weren't because my achievements were so great. Maybe they just understood my achievements better because they were smaller. The conversation with Marcus was the only productive family communication I had that year. My parents continued their campaign for reconciliation through every channel available: emails, texts, calls, messages relayed through relatives. The underlying theme was consistent: I had hurt them by succeeding without their involvement, and I owed them inclusion in a life they'd never prioritized. We want to come visit your new office. We want to meet your colleagues. We want to be part of this. They wanted the reflected glory. They wanted to tell their friends about touring NASA, about meeting astronauts, about their daughter the division director. They wanted the benefits of my success without having invested in the relationship that would have made sharing natural. The reconciliation attempt came 6 months after the CNN interview. My mother arranged a family dinner, just the 4 of us, to clear the air and move forward. She'd flown to California specifically for the occasion, booking a restaurant near my new apartment. I agreed to attend. I wanted to understand if anything had actually changed or if this was just a new strategy for the same old dynamic. The dinner started predictably. We're so proud of you, my mother said, reaching across the table to grasp my hand. Everything you've accomplished, it's more than we ever imagined. You couldn't imagine it because you never paid attention to what I was working toward. That's not fair. We didn't understand the science. You didn't try to understand. Marcus's work in insurance isn't complicated, but you couldn't even ask basic questions about my research. You just dismissed it as school stuff and waited for me to do something you recognized as real. My father interjected. We made mistakes. We admit that. But dwelling on the past doesn't help anyone. I'm not dwelling. I'm explaining why the relationship you want isn't available. You can't skip my graduation for Marcus's party, then expect front row seats to my NASA career. We said we were sorry about the graduation. You said it was a difficult choice. That's not the same as sorry. The dinner ended without resolution. My parents wanted a reconciliation that required me to forget their decades of favoritism. I wanted an acknowledgement that went beyond mistakes were made to genuine understanding of the pattern and its impact. We couldn't find common ground because we weren't seeking the same thing. They wanted access. I wanted accountability. Those aren't compatible goals when accountability feels too costly for the people who owe it. The years since have established a new equilibrium. I maintain minimal contact with my parents, holiday calls, occasional emails, nothing requiring emotional investment. They've accepted this distance reluctantly, still hoping that time will soften my boundaries. Marcus and I have developed an unexpected friendship. His own experiences with professional disappointment gave him perspective our parents still lack. We talk regularly now, comparing notes on a childhood we experienced very differently despite sharing the same house. They still don't get it, he told me during a recent call. Mom showed me an article about your Mars mission presentation, and her comment was, I wish she'd included us more. Not, I wish we'd supported her more. The accountability always flows in the wrong direction. That's how they're built. Changing it would require examining their choices honestly. Think they ever will? I think they'll die believing they were good parents who had an ungrateful daughter. And I've made peace with that. The Mars mission launched last year. My propulsion systems performed beyond specifications. The spacecraft I helped design is currently en route to establish the foundation for humanity's first permanent presence on another planet. It was the biggest achievement of my career, bigger than the PhD, bigger than the NASA appointment, bigger than anything I'd previously accomplished. I didn't tell my parents about the launch in advance. They watched the coverage like everyone else, seeing my name in headlines, my face in interviews, my work enabling something historic. My mother left a voicemail afterward. We watched the launch. It was incredible. Your father cried. She didn't say she was proud. She didn't apologize for missing everything that led to this moment. She just reported their emotional response, as if that constituted connection. The empty seats at my Stanford graduation symbolized something I've spent years understanding. My parents' absence wasn't about one day's scheduling conflict. It was the clearest expression of a lifetime of choices, a pattern so consistent that my greatest achievements would always rank below Marcus S. minor milestones. When CNN announced my NASA appointment, they saw what the world saw, a historic achievement worthy of celebration. But they couldn't share in that celebration authentically because they hadn't shared in the journey that produced it. You don't get to skip the process and claim the product. I lead a team of 200 engineers now. We're designing the systems that will sustain human life on Mars: propulsion, life support, communications, everything that makes interplanetary colonization possible rather than fictional. My office has a window that faces the assembly building where our spacecraft components are constructed. Sometimes I stand there, watching pieces of humanity's future take shape, and I think about those empty seats at Stanford. They don't hurt anymore. The absence that once symbolized rejection now represents something else, proof that external validation isn't necessary for internal satisfaction. I built a career without my parents' support. I achieved recognition without their recognition. I became someone they couldn't help but notice, not because I wanted their attention, but because the work itself mattered. The little girl who performed for parents who would watch became a woman who performs for the future of human exploration. That's a better audience anyway. They skipped my PhD graduation for Marcus's promotion party. Junior manager at an insurance company trumped a doctorate from Stanford. I walked across that stage to empty seats, and I didn't cry because I'd spent a lifetime learning that tears didn't change their priorities. 3 days later, my mother called 14 times in 1 hour. CNN had announced that I'd been appointed to lead NASA's Mars division, the youngest woman in history. They'd missed my graduation, but they couldn't miss the headlines. "Why didn't you tell us?" she demanded. Because telling them never made them care. Because sharing achievements with people who wouldn't value them only diminished the joy. They wanted into my success after opting out of my struggle. But you don't get to skip the process and claim the product. The empty seats stay empty. And I fly to Mars anyway.